Well, joining me at week's end, our Canadian Press parliamentary reporter, Kristy Kirkup, Globe and Mail Ottawa Bureau Chief Robert Fife, who broke the story a month ago with his colleagues at the Globe, and John Ivison, a columnist with the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Post Media. Good to see you all. Bob, let me start with you. We have a decision today by the federal court to reject SNC-Lavalin's request to review the decision by the Director of Public Prosecutions not to give them an out-of-court settlement to deal with this whole issue, these criminal charges. What do you think? Now it's up to David Lametti. If he wants to give them a deferred prosecution agreement, what do you think he does?
Well, I think the decision today bolsters the case of Jody Wilson-Raybould that she did not want to interfere in the decision of the federal prosecution to go ahead with criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, because the court is very clear in saying that this decision should be left in the hands of the Public Prosecution Service. So that does not mean that the Justice Minister doesn't have the power to be able to overrule it. And I think if they did that, and although the Prime Minister even today has not ruled it out,
no, neither certainly has David Lametti.
If they do overrule the federal prosecutor on this, I think there'll be damage to pay for politically. I think it would not, the smell would not be very good across the country, including in Quebec.
Kristy, what do you think? I mean, the government's argument all the way along is that this needs to be looked at as a serious option for SNC-Lavalin because of the economic impact of a criminal prosecution on the company. Could the government just ride that argument now? And David Lametti said, look, we hinted we were going to do it. Now we're going to do it.
I think it's a bit late for that argument. As you pointed out, we're a month into this story, and I think that that has been one of the perhaps most surprising things, is that the government really hasn't been able to turn the message track around. And we saw that even with the Prime Minister coming out just a couple of days ago, yesterday, actually, just to speak about this issue, about the 9,000 jobs that were at stake. That's why they were looking to try and come up with a solution. We heard Jody Wilson-Raybould detail that over the span of 4 months that she felt like she was experiencing sustained pressure. And the Prime Minister, even though she told him that the door was closed, he still tried to impress upon her that you know, she should be looking at taking another decision. I agree with Bob. The decision from the court just reinforces the point, which was that she was not willing to intervene because this was a decision taken by the prosecution office.
John, what do you think?
Well, I think they would dearly love to take that action. I think politically they're not going to be able to do it, even though they might gain politically in Quebec because of it. I mean, to me, the only way that this happens is if they win the next election, and this case is still before the courts, because I think the Attorney General can still make that decision right up until the final moment before the court case is resolved. Right. It's politically toxic now for them.
Yeah, I'm sure that in many circles, Bob, they were hoping that this federal court ruling would have gone the other way. It's an unprecedented request by SNC-Lavalin to have a judicial review of a DPP's.
But I mean, I think they must have been realistic in knowing that unless there was clear abusive process, this was not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, it was a Hail Mary.
I mean, the problem they have here, and we don't know the reasons why the federal prosecutor decided to proceed with it.
Right.
And we don't know why Jody Wilson-Raybould decided as Attorney General to back up the prosecution office. But we can look at why probably it happened. This is a company that was banned by the World Bank for 10 years for bribery. This is a company that, what we know from the Swiss trial, had bribed Libyan officials. We know that the same company was convicted of bribery in the McGill University Health Center, and they're now under investigation by the RCMP over the Champagne Bridge thing. This is not an isolated group of rogues. This is a company that's
culture.
A culture of corruption. And if you look at the deferred prosecution legislation, this is really for a few bad apples in a company, not the whole. But when the whole culture of the company seems to be one where bribery and fraud is second nature, you can actually understand why she thought she should go ahead with that. And her key witness is Ben Isaiah, who has all the details and provided to the RCMP of what that culture was all about.
Right, which speaks even more, Kristy, to the whole the political conversation that's taking place within the Liberal government about this. In the face of that, and whatever Jody Wilson-Raybould has seen and knows and has heard from her Director of Public Prosecutions, it's not on to give this company a break, and yet other members of the government, including the Prime Minister, are pushing for it. Right? I mean, what does it say about those conversations and how they're operating.
Well, I think in terms of even the Prime Minister's message on this, again, why wasn't it a month ago that we were really hearing loud and clear that essentially they were just, I mean, they talked about the need to stand up for jobs, but we know from a number of public opinion polls that this is a story that is hurting the Prime Minister on a personal level, and we talk about not even being able to shift gears and to get back. And so to your question, I think that at the end of the day, we have a situation where the Prime Minister has not been able to make the case to Canadians as to why there was this push to try and help out the company, specifically given the track record that Bob just mentioned.
Well, let's talk about maybe that sheds some light on the thinking here and why it was all happening behind closed doors. And they didn't want to have to come out publicly with this narrative until Jody Wilson-Raybould.
They didn't want to.
Well, yes, no, but so maybe they know, to Bob's point, maybe they know exactly what Jody Wilson-Raybould knows about the company and why they're not getting a break. And they were hoping they could fix this in conversations with Jody Wilson-Raybould and not have to have it out in the public square, which is what's happening now.
Yeah, well, I think they claimed that the PMO did not have the Section 13 notice, which detailed the specifics of the case. But it is, I mean, it's just been one farce after another for the Prime Minister's office. And
But to not have the notice, I mean, I know that, but not have the notice, but everything Bob just told us is in the public square.
Right.
You know, they would know all of this, and as Bob said, you can connect the dots.
But you know, it's part of a broader narrative where I think that the Prime Minister feels he's on some kind of mission or almost a crusade, and therefore he requires to fulfil that crusade, he needs to get re-elected, and to get re-elected, he has to do things which, if his opponents were doing them, he would think were beyond the pale. And I think he's just turned a blind eye to behaviour which clearly they would have known that was borderline illegal. Keep continually pressing the Attorney General after she'd made up her mind on a prosecution.
Next week we think we.
Just if I may say so, it's not just the company. They were doing it for political reasons. They were doing it to help the Quebec provincial party in the last fall's election, and they were trying to help the federal Liberal Party in the coming election campaign.
I think that if the committee was to keep its hearings and bring more witnesses forward, Matthew Bouchard, who is alleged to have made the comment, we need to get re-elected. Right. I mean, that seems to be very pertinent to what's been going on.
We can have all the best policies in the world,
He'll
but
probably
we're not.
be like everybody else. They just don't remember that conversation. Right. She experienced it differently than me.
Well, let's stay on the committee, because the committee meets Wednesday, I'm told now, of next week, to decide next steps. And that, you know, we know the Conservatives and the New Democrats want Jody Wilson-Raybould back before the committee, and they'd like it before Thursday. And she wants to come back. She said she's prepared to. What do we watch for at this meeting next week?
Yeah, I think that there's that central question of whether or not Jody Wilson-Raybould will have specifically an opportunity to respond to Gerald Butts, because we have a situation now where also Jane Philpott, an incredibly well-respected member of the cabinet, she was just out today in Ottawa, of course, not speaking specifically about her decision to resign, but you have her also bolstering. She was around the cabinet table when she heard from Jody Wilson-Raybould about the concerns about what happened in this alleged attempt to politically interfere. So, yeah, will she have the opportunity to come back and respond to Gerald Butts's testimony, specifically this week, saying that there was an effort, a couple of things to respond to, the effort around looking for a former Supreme Court judge, perhaps, to get a second legal opinion on this, and also, again, the suggestion about seeing facts differently. What does she have to say to that? And I think
I think everybody wants to know that. The thing is, it'll tell us a lot about where the government's head is on this story if it's in one place now.
I think
these Liberal committee members next Wednesday, John, this is the pivotal moment for them. But they either shut down Jody Wilson-Raybould, or they say we have no choice but to hear her again.
Well, it seems to be that they after Butts' testimony, Trudeau comes along and is contrite without actually being contrite. Right. In an attempt to normalise the situation, like we're moving forward, we're looking ahead from now. We've got lessons learned, but we're going to. So that it seems to me that the last thing they want now is for the flames to be fanned again by more witnesses. So I would imagine those. I mean,
what's the political consequence of next Wednesday? We hear that this committee, the Liberals have voted that Jody Wilson-Raybould's not coming back.
It's cover up. That's what it is, and story won't go away because she still hasn't finished telling her story. which is, and there's an issue of fairness. And we still, to John's point, we haven't heard from Matthew Bouchard and Katie Telford or Jessica Prince, who was Miss Wilson-Raybould's chief of staff, who had text messages about these conversations. We need to hear from her as well. I mean, this story is not going to go away, and they cannot make it go away. He had a chance this week to help limit the damage. He could have come out and said, we were doing this in the best interest of the country because we're worried about jobs, you know, but on reflection, we didn't handle this right. We shouldn't have continued pressing the Attorney General. We will not do this again. In fact, we're going to looking at splitting off this department. He might have been able to dampen down this controversy, but he's only added more fuel to the flame.
He doesn't think he's done anything
They don't
wrong.
think he doesn't believe. You're hearing from people that fundamentally he thinks that everything they did was okay. That it said it is.
He was the one who said to
different
told his staff,
interpretations of truth.
We're not apologizing. We have nothing to apologize for.
Quickly to each of you now. My question is this: it's kind of a larger conceptual kind of questions. How do they get? What is it about the way that this government, this prime minister operates that got them to this point where they're in the middle of a fire they can't seem to douse? They have two cabinet ministers who have openly said they have no confidence, have quit the cabinet, still want to remain in caucus, and they still haven't kicked them out. What is it about? You know, help me make sense of what the thinking is, if you can.
I think it is a reflection on Justin Trudeau's character, that the point that he was able to reach was that there was an erosion of trust between his former principal secretary and the former minister that he should have been aware of. And when he was explicitly asked, are you apologizing, he stopped short of doing so. And I think that at the very least, it wouldn't cost him anything to say, I regret that this situation happened. I am sorry for that erosion of trust. The words, I'm sorry, did not come out of his mouth. And the fact that, again, a month into this, they have not been able to, they are feeding the fire, if you will. It's a situation that I really do think reflects his personal character. It is reflective of how he goes about.
Just on that point, I mean, that idea that it was about an erosion of trust between his principal secretary and Jody Wilson-Raybould. It wasn't his principal secretary who was on the who was telling Michael Wernick, the clerk of the Privy Council, I want to get this done. I'm determined to get this done. And Wernick then passed on to Wilson-Raybould that you don't want to be on a collision course.
PM's in a mood, and he wants
the PM in a mood. I mean, that's not about an erosion of trust between those two people. It's Trudeau.
Final comment to you about
the bottom line.
Why are we here?
The bottom line on this is that the Prime Minister does not have a good relationship with his cabinet ministers or his caucus. When he meets with his cabinet minister, he always has somebody in the room so they don't feel comfortable talking to him bluntly. He doesn't have any proper caucus outreach. The caucus does not feel like they don't have a caucus,
right.
For example, somebody in caucus that deals with them, their complaints, and takes them to the Prime Minister. And when it comes to almost every major controversy that this government has had, whether it's from cash to access or ACON or Huawei or whatever, they don't know how to manage the crisis, and it gets out of hand because they don't have anybody with any kind of media or strategic understanding to how you deal with political crisis in the big town of Ottawa. It ain't Queen's Park.
All right. Thank you very much. Talk to you again soon. Bye now.